Hey guys, how's it going? Kripp here. I have a Diablo 4 video for you guys today, and it is one regarding dungeons. So, Blizzard has made a lot of changes to the game in the early few days and weeks of Diablo 4's release, and a lot of them early on have been class changes, but later on, and constantly now, have been dungeon nerfs. The most effective way to level has been repeating the same dungeon on the just base game difficulty again and again and again, and resetting through party means or just logging out in between. And some dungeons are created much better than others for the sake of farming, for experience, for layout, for whatnot. And what has been happening is a lot of content creators release a video. It's like, just do this dungeon, it's going to be so good for leveling, or do this dungeon, it's going to be so good for leveling. And what's happening is Blizzard is like top down, the best dungeons, the most popular dungeons, nerf, 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 nerf. So there's not really any point to really, it's like, oh, I watched this video, this dungeon is going to be really good, I'm going to go do that dungeon. Probably if you stumbled on that video, that dungeon is already nerfed. They have done this so many times and have more recently done a blanket nerf. They've tried to standardize dungeons, and I think there are still, some dungeons are a little bit better than others through their standardizing, and we can debate as to why they do this. Generally, in my opinion, the reason why they do this is because the leveling part of the game is the game right now. There's really not a lot to do once you hit level 100, but it takes a long time to hit level 100. If you power through the same dungeon nonstop, you'll get to level 100 faster, but overall you'll have a less satisfactory character experience. My recommendation to have a fuller character experience, and because they've basically nerfed every single dungeon to this point, is to play the Nightmare Sigils. And this is not a unique conclusion. A few content creators have made this suggestion as well. But I think there is one really important part to this that has not been sufficiently discussed. A lot of people who have played Diablo 4 ever since its release, and even before that, a crazy amount of hours, take a lot of the inventory micromanagement for granted. The case is that Nightmare Sigils do indeed give you some of the best experience possible right now, and a lot of the dungeon changes they have made do not affect the Nightmare Sigils. Like, one dungeon that has been repeatedly nerfed is Champion's Demise, and I did a Champion's Demise Nightmare Sigil just the other day, and it felt like the exact instance I did 2 weeks ago. So it is very good to do some of these specific dungeons still on the Nightmare Sigils. And there are some baseline Nightmare Sigil mechanics. Let's just quickly run over them. The first is the level requirement. So when you look at a Nightmare Sigil itself, it has a tier. What does that tier mean? The Nightmare Sigils actually escape the level scaling system in the game. The Nightmare Sigils are going to have monsters that are the tier of the dungeon plus 54. Okay? Don't ask me why. Okay? That's just how it works. And the best monster level differential to get experience, the highest bonus you're going to get with monsters that are 3 levels above you. So the best way to do Nightmare Sigils is to see what level you are, subtract 51, and then do those sigils. You can do sigils that are much, much higher, but the amount of experience you gain is not sufficient based on the ramp in difficulty. So right now, I'm level 79, and I want to target sigils that are minus 51. So I want to be doing sigils that are about 28. Now, I've been doing ones that are a little bit higher, but, I try to avoid the much, much higher ones. Another aspect is you really want to avoid doing Nightmare Sigils that crush your build. So for example, this specific Nightmare Sigil, it has monsters take 60% less poison. If almost all my damage was poison, it would be a pretty poor choice to do this Nightmare Sigil. Now, when you click a Nightmare Sigil, it kind of has like a prompt, and if you click on your map immediately, like I can do this here. I think I have some sigils I actually really like. I'm not even going to run this. So if I get that, okay, so we get this prompt. If that prompt is there, and right at that moment, I click the map, I can put a marker, then zoom out, and then teleport to the closest town, and then walk there. Again, people who've played this game hundreds and hundreds of hours will not really talk about this because for them, it's just like, yeah, that's obviously just how you do them. Okay, people that haven't done Nightmare Sigils, there's like a wall of terrible quality of life mechanics. So I'm going to give you guys the tips on how to get through that, okay? Now, when you do the Nightmare Sigil itself, there are a number of different sigils. Not every dungeon has a Nightmare Sigil of it. There's like over 100 dungeons. There's like 20 or so, maybe 30 different Nightmare Sigils in the pool right now. It's not all the dungeons. So you will see some repeat dungeons, okay? And there are people who have a lot of tier lists on the best Nightmare dungeons to run. But my advice is to largely ignore that. That is for really high-level farming. Most people that are looking up the basics on Nightmare Sigils aren't really there yet. The best Nightmare Sigil to run is one that is the appropriate level, the appropriate difficulty, and most importantly, the Nightmare Sigil that you have more than one copy of. Okay? Because if you have two, let's say, Ghoulrond Canals, it just becomes one of the best ones to run, because you do the Nightmare Sigil, you walk over there to the map, and then you do Leave Dungeon at the end, or you can just teleport to town, use the next sigil of that same type, and when you port back in, it ports you to the very start of the instance. Very nice tip there. And you just don't have to do that run back or the double run back. And that just saves you the most amount of time, okay? Dungeons are not created equal, but having to run, check, and do this stuff constantly is going to just ruin your quality of life and actually create inefficiency to even doing some of the better sigils. You can craft sigils on the Occultist, and I do recommend doing this because while you are going to get like 1.5 to 2x the sigils that you put in, so you put in one sigil, you're gonna find like maybe 2 on average if you kill like every boss in the map or every mob in the map, but you're typically not gonna kill quite all of them, so you're gonna get like 1.5 to 2 based on how many you kill. But you're gonna keep getting sigils of a similar level. Every few levels, you're gonna want to go to the Occultist, and you're going to want to get rid of the sigils that are too low level for you, or perhaps you want to stash some that are too high level for you, and you're going to craft ones in a more appropriate level range. You don't want to be too aggressive with this. I wouldn't craft more than 10 of a new sigil level, and because at that point you only have 10, you just kind of do them one at a time until you start building up your pool once again. Now we're going to talk about the biggest tip. Okay, this is the only thing that, in my opinion, makes running Nightmare Sigils playable from a quality of life and frustration standpoint. So you guys know there is this like button here called Sort. Okay, it's tiny, but it's really important. So if you're on like your gear page and you do Sort, what it does is it does like helm, chests, offhands, two hands, one hands, and then it like orders them. But it also orders them in terms of item level, so it's like pretty good. Like this is a one-hander, this is a one-hander, and this is a one-hander, and they are placed in terms of their item power or their item level. So if I'm not even going to consider using like a one-hander under item level 800, which is basically where I'm at, and I hover over the first one-hander, I can basically not look at the next ones. Okay, so this is really good for just quickly scanning through your inventory when you want to like vendor or use the blacksmith to salvage it. Now this system does apply to Nightmare Sigils as well, but it's actually a little bit better, believe it or not. So if you do the sort for Nightmare Sigils, it'll place them in the order of tiers in your inventory. So see, it has a 37 there, 34s, 33s, 31s. I don't think I have anything lower than 31s because I actually just crafted this batch. I don't have that many. The best tip for Nightmare Sigil running is to have an entire stash tabs dedicated to them. And because the stash tabs, there's only 4, they're small, and this system is horrendous, it might be hard for you to do that. You might have to make a mule. Yes, guys, it's 2023, and we're making mules in a brand new Diablo title. But it is what it is. So why do you want a stash tab full of sigils? So if we put all the sigils there, you will notice that the stash tab has a sort button as well. Now the sort button in the stash tab is not the same as the sort button in your inventory. If you press the sort button in your stash tab, it will not order them based on level. It will order them based on the region in which they are from. And while I have a pretty small batch of sigils here, when you have nearly a full tab of them, you will notice some things like perhaps you have twice as many in the Fractured Peaks region. And if you do, you can start to hover over them and see if you have multiple copies. It's easier to have multiple copies. So for example here, I have 2 Wreathwind Wilds. And remember what I said, the best sigil to run is the one that you have multiple copies of. So the way that I do this is pretty simple. I quickly put all the stuff in my stash tab. Then I see which ones I might have doubles of, and then I right-click them so they go to the top left of my inventory, and I don't sort my inventory. So I do, okay, I have 2 Wreathwind Wilds, bam, bam, okay? I have 2 Champion's Demise, I think. No, it wasn't Champion's Demise. It was Guron Canals. Sorry, Guron Canals. So I get 2 of those. And then I do that for like, you know, with a full stash tab, you're going to have like 3, 4, 5 of like, yeah, 2 or 3 different groups. So I can run 1, 2, and then 1, 2. And I just save myself 2 sessions of searching for crap on the map, porting in and out, and walking to the actual dungeon and dealing with all the crap in the way, like barriers, the crappy system of mounts, and all that. So that is the only way. Being an inventory master is the only way that I can justify actually feeling good about running Nightmare Sigils. Now, while the current system of running dungeons seems to be nerfed and nerfed and nerfed and nerfed, the Nightmare Sigils seems pretty untouched. But until we have quality of life systems with Nightmare Sigils and inventory and sorting functions and just more inventory space across the board, it is not going to feel great to run them. But they have so many things that they need to kind of fine-tune and fix in the near future. You might be watching this video like a month or 2 from now, and you will have to operate Nightmare Sigils the exact same way. Now, if you do become like a pro at Nightmare Sigils, there's a lot of players that have like tier lists out there for like which are the best sigils to run. You can start looking into that, but it is largely class-based, I would say. For example, some of the worst Nightmare Sigils on most of the tier lists are actually pretty good for Necromancer, because Necromancer excels at dealing with minions that are kind of like one of and spread out. Most classes really hate those, like the ranged monsters. Well, for Necro, the Skeleton Mages just cast away and just level them for you. You just like walk through it. It's easy peasy. But if you're playing like a Sork and your goal is to grab them all in the same position and drop a firewall underneath them, those dungeons suck. So you really need to kind of take those tier lists with a grain of salt and be a bit understanding of the classes that they are coming from. With that said, happy dungeoning, and we'll see you next time.